It's digger day. I'm gonna try back it off. It is day 3 or day 4 of the foundation. So I have the digger in. I'm not exactly sure what kind of digger it is. So I'm going to take it off and get it into where the foundations are going to be, and then I'm going to dig out the footing pads for the foundations and also a trench around where the foundations will be. So I've marked them all out, I'm all ready to go. I've never used a digger before, so this may be funny, I'm not sure. Before we get into it, this is building a dream. I'm Jasmine and I bought this untouched land with the goal to build my own off-grid container house and homestead with no experience. I'm gonna bring her down the middle here, and then I can do each side as I go and measure it along the way, and then I will do the same down the far column as well, and that will be everything done. And then I also need to do a trench around here as well. You're about to bear witness to the first moment of me ever using an excavator. Full disclosure, I've never operated a digger before. I actually didn't even watch a YouTube video for this one. The guy ran through the controls with me and I felt confident to drive her home and do it alone. So let's give it a go. In my last video, part 1 of this foundation series, I did all the measuring and marking out for my foundations. I explained I'll be having 16 footings and footing pads, and I also discovered that the measurements on the engineered plans had been wrong. So now I'm up to the digging stage of the foundations, and this is and will be the longest and most challenging part of doing my whole foundation build. Who would have thought digging holes would be so hard? Don't worry, I do eventually work out that I need to put down the counterweight, which is that scoop looking thing on the bottom of the digger. This should also be behind you as I dig, but I had to be careful not to erase the spray paint markings that I'd made on the ground. Now, the way I pictured this going was the digger's bucket just cutting through the ground like butter. However, as you can see, that's definitely not the case. The reason why the digger is struggling is because my ground type is clay, and because summer has just passed, it's at its hardest. But it's the only time I can do it, because the moment it gets wet from the rain, it turns into this gross slush, and then I wouldn't be able to get the concrete truck in or the containers delivered until summer again. And I was not willing to wait over 6 months for my home build to begin. I mean, I've already waited a year to get to this point since buying the land. There is definitely a learning curve to using these, but once you get the hang of it, it does become like second nature. I'm a big believer in learning through hands-on experience, repetition, and making mistakes, which I'll demonstrate all for you today. I was told by a lot of people before I dug the holes, don't over-dig because it's harder to backfill. Now, silly enough, I listened to this without thinking about it myself, and over the next 2 days of having the digger, I tried not to over-dig the holes. It wasn't until after I returned the digger that I realised that because of my plans and my soil type, that I needed formwork within my holes. So this meant that I would need to end up digging out the rest by hand, but we'll get to that soon. What I took away from that was that it's great to get advice and knowledge from others, but it's always good to remember that it may not be relevant to your situation, so it's always good to do your own research. Also, I've had a lot of people ask why I'm choosing to do my foundations this way, and that's a really easy answer. I'm just following my engineered and approved building plans, as well as the National Building Code and the Australian standards. So I need to actually stick to these plans to pass all of my inspections along the way. These building plans took 8 months to develop, and they went through a bunch of different people before they got approval, like draftsmen, engineers, energy assessors, bell assessors, building assessors. And yes, my plans may be a little bit over-engineered, but it's due to my soil being the worst type for foundations. At the moment, it's rock-hard clay, but as soon as the winter comes, it turns to mush, and there is a lot of movement. So I'm more than happy for the plans to be over-engineered so that the foundations last for many, many years to come. So, my original plan was to hire the digger for one day because I have a very small budget. However, as drop-off time crept nearer, I realised I would definitely be needing another day. So I called old mate and he said I could keep her for another day. So that meant getting up at the crack of dawn and going again for another day of digging, which surely I thought would be enough time. I was definitely making progress, but as the day started nearing the end again, I realised this job would not be completed by the digger. Okay, so I've got 1 hour before I need to get this digger back and on the truck and back to where it belongs. And I've done the best job that I can do with the foundations, with digging the footing pads and a trench around the outside for the water run. And now I've got about an hour, so I thought, hey, how about I try and dig out this wet area here that I wanted to turn into a dam. So I'm gonna try do that and see how I go, but I have to be careful because the ground is really damp over here. So let's do it. The underground spring is probably the most exciting project I have on my land, along with the container house, and I have big plans to turn it into an above ground water wonderland. And this is where it's all beginning. So this was much more what I had in mind when I pictured the digger cutting into the ground like butter. Look how much I got in just one scoop. However, I did soon find out when I drove the digger close to the underground spring that it started to sink and get bogged. So I wasn't able to get as close as I wanted, and I realised then that no heavy machinery probably ever would. This means in the future, I predict I'll be digging a lot of this up by hand, and I'm happy for that to be future Jasmine's problem at this point. But the exciting part was, as soon as I started to dig, the hole began to fill with water. I was only able to dig maybe 30 centimetres or so deep, but after the water had settled, it is still looking beautiful a month later. And just like that, it was knock-off time for the digger. This meant that the rest of the digging journey would be done mainly by hand with a lot more tools than I ever could have predicted. Day 7 of the foundation build. And the first 3 days were marking. Next 2 days I had the digger that I hired. And then I worked on the forms. And now I need to get back to these holes. So basically, I dug them out the best I could in those 2 days with the digger. But look, they're not great. So I need to get in there and make them perfect and get them to size. And yeah, that's going to be a lot of hard work. I first went in with this pickaxe and I realised after only 10 minutes this isn't the fighter that I wanted to choose for myself.
This is fucked up.
So that's when the real show stealer came along, this blue heavy guy that apparently has many names such as crowbar, fencing bar and Jimmy bar. And I rated a solid 6 out of 10 for effort. As heavy as it is and as hard as it was to use, it was the only tool that even made a dent. This would then be followed by a lot of digging, shoveling and wheelbarrowing.
Okay, let's run through the whole process of what I've been doing to do one of these holes. So, step number 1 was getting in the digger. I thought I was going to be able to dig out everything, always do, obviously I couldn't. So, step 2, I've been going like this. Step number 3, so I've just been bringing it all into the middle. So just dragging it all into the middle so I can grab it. You can use the shovel, or I like to use my boots. Kind of works even better.
Step 4, shovel it all out.
Okay, step 5. When I've got as much with my boots and the shovel that I can, I go in with my hands. Yeah, I know, my hands. But I find that it gets the bits out in the corner the best, and I can work out what is broken up and what still needs to be done. So I use my hands and I bring it all into the center like this, so I can get the last little bits out and then start the process all over again. All right, step 6, let's get all this sand out the middle again. Step 7, now that I've got all the dirt out I grab my blue pole that I buried. Oh, sorry. And we put her here, and then I grab here just to check how far off I am. This one's still got a bit to go, so it needs to be at least up to here deep so I can compact it and everything. So that one's deep enough in the middle, this one is not yet. Alright, 1 down, 7 to go.
I continued to use this method to dig the holes for a couple more weeks.
This is a lot of holes. It is day 13 of the foundation build. I've got a little surprise that I found on Marketplace yesterday that is going to make my foundation job so much easier. So I'm going to show you guys that after I've got all this sand out, because then I can use it. Okay, so this is it. This is my new little friend who's going to help me with the footings. This is a demolition hammer or a jackhammer. It's really heavy for me and it basically is just going to break up the ground. So I've got a spade attachment put on it, and so I was looking up how to best do this because everyone's like wet the hole, but the ground here is clay and it's really hard and dry at the moment because it's the driest time of the year for it, and it would take a lot of water to wet, which I don't have because I've only got a small supply because I don't have my house, my shed set up yet to put water into my rainwater tank. So I've just got to have what's in there. I looked up for ages what I could use, but there wasn't really any ground like mine. And then finally I found one video and this guy was digging out his basement and he had clay soil like this as well. And I was like, oh, thank God. And it looked rock hard like mine. I was like, yep, that's what I need. And so he said he got one of these with a spade attachment, and I've tested it out and I'll show you. It is amazing. It is going to be so much faster than using that big blue thing. What you want to do is, well, not want to do is be careful not to get it stuck in there. So if you were just to go like this,
don't want to do it too much because I don't have my earplugs in at the moment, but if you go down too far, you're going to get it stuck and it won't be able to come out. So you've got to make sure that you're kind of moving it a little bit all the time so that it doesn't get stuck, and doing it on a bit of an angle. But it's definitely way faster than the way I was doing. After getting the jackhammer, it took me less than a week to complete the rest of the holes, and it was actually quite easy apart from coming across things like this. But I worked through it all and I got all the roots and organic matter out of the holes. And before I knew it, in little over a month, I had officially finished digging out my 16 footings, which are now ready for sand, blue metal and compaction. But first I'm moving on to framework and rebar.